Have you ever felt like you're doing all the right things, pushing, performing, producing, yet still feel disconnected from true wealth? What if the missing link isn't what you're doing, but how you're being? I'm Ana Ramos, and today on our Health and Wealth podcast, we're coming back to a truth that often gets lost in the noise. Wealth isn't just strategy, it's energy. And when our inner masculine and feminine are out of sync, when we're either in burnout mode or stuck in passivity, we lose our natural flow. I'm pleased to welcome back Louise Jeffrey, a human potential coach who helps high performers return to harmony by rebalancing these inner dynamics. Together, we'll explore how the synergy between doing and being can unlock a new kind of wealth that we call Wellbeing. So whether you've been hustling on overdrive or waiting for momentum to find you, this conversation is your invitation to come back to you and create wealth from the inside out. Hi, everyone. Louise, it's so good to have you back. I love technology. So thank you so much for joining us again. You know, we were talking last week about, you briefly mentioned a little bit about male and female energy, the doing and the being. And, you know, I find it to be just so beautiful and so amazing to be able to talk about that because, you know, this podcast is about the things that we don't usually talk about, right? So we talk about male and female energy. It's almost like an accepted thing out there today. But I want us, in this particular, 30 minutes, I want us to talk a little bit deeper than that. What does male energy mean? What does female energy mean? You know, and there's so many reiterations of it, whether it's male, masculine energy, feminine energy, being energy, doing energy. But let's get a little bit deeper into it. And I want us to talk more about how that affects our overall connection to money, and that ultimately affects to the way, our overall well-being, right? So from our health perspective to our careers to our relationships, right? So this episode is just full of wonderful, amazing things that we're going to talk about. My favorite subject, male energy, female energy. So Louise, I'm going to open up the floor all for you. You're just absolutely amazing at what you do. I love every time we converse, and I just want to share a little bit of that love to our listeners. So with that being said, let's get this started. Welcome.
Hey, Anna, and it's so beautiful to be here. I love chatting to you. So yeah, it's the way that I like to kind of just set the context for the masculine feminine energy, and I call it masculine feminine because rather than male female, I think because there's this sense of that every single human being has both masculine and feminine energy within them. And neither of those are wrong, neither of those are right. They just literally are part of the laws of nature. And so we talked about this in episode 1. We talked about, money is energy, and money is not just the physical money or the transactions that we know it to be. Money is energy, and money is really, it's a neutral flowing force that really amplifies who we already are. But when we look at it in the context of money and the money story, the masculine energy really represents things like structure and logic and direction and the action that we take to create wealth or to spend wealth or to earn income. It's the doing part of money. And so it's that action that allows money to flow in and out of our lives. And it allows us to make decisions. It allows us to take intentional action. And this might look like in the context of, particularly the work that you do, for example, it might be, setting financial goals or tracking your income and expenses, allocating your money, or making investment decisions, for example. Now, and as most of us are taught, that's really where most of us are educated in the masculine side, the masculine energy side of money. But the feminine side of energy is often neglected within us. And that feminine energy represents the softer side of money. It really represents things like intuition, creativity, receptivity, the flow of abundance. You will have heard this term abundance being used, and abundance is not, it's not just about money. It's really a state of being, of whether we allow energy to flow into our lives. But the feminine energy, when it comes to money, it's really about things like trust that we have enough. It's about feeling, it's about allowing, as I said, abundance to kind of flow in. And the examples that we might use for the feminine energy might be things like tuning into your intuition before making a financial decision, right? Um, Receiving support from someone like yourself, for example, Anna. Being able to visualize abundance, being able to see yourself with an abundant life, with the wealth that you want to create. And also spending time in alignment in things like feeling the joy of having money, feeling gratitude for having money. So there's this real kind of difference between the masculine energy, which is the doing and the taking action, which is absolutely necessary to have a positive and healthy relationship with money and to have a good money story. But there's also this other side of money, which is the feminine energy, which is more about receiving. And that's really what, male energy or masculine energy is more directed, more action taking, whereas the feminine is more about receiving. And we really want these to be in harmony. We have to, for us to have a really positive relationship with money and to have a really solid, uplifting money story, it has to be both. We have to have both the masculine.
I love as I'm listening to you and I hear what you're saying, I'm like, all these questions get formulated into my head, right? Like, for example, what is abundance? Like we hear that terminology so widely used today. But what is abundance? What is it? Can you in a very short way define what abundance is?
So, many people kind of equate abundance with money, and they kind of believe that having more money equals abundance. But true abundance actually goes far beyond financial wealth. Because money is really, as we discussed earlier, it's just simply a tool with which to exchange, right? For days of old, we were using cattle or grain, and now we're not even really using paper anymore. We're using plastic cards or transactions. But money is simply a tool or a means of exchange, whereas abundance is really a state of being. It's
Wow.
the way that we feel in our lives on a day-to-day basis. It's the frequency that we put out into the world of enoughness. Do I have enough? Do I feel like I have enough with what I have right now, even if I don't have, however, whatever money it is that I want in my bank account. So I hope that articulates it for you and in a kind of succinct way.
It's basically a state of being. That's what it is. And I think it's a state of being not just with our money, but with our health, with our careers, with our, obviously we did talk about money, but also with our relationships, with our own personal growth, right? It's all about a state of being. And then the other word that you use is about creating this harmony, right? And it's so funny because when we talk about the 5 pillars of wealth, which the next episode is going to talk a little bit more about, when we talk about those things, I never use the word balance. And I noticed that you did not use it either, use the word harmony, because I think that we talk about, I need to create this balance in life and career. And, we talk so freely about the word balance, but what is balance, right? In order for you to have balance, you got to apply force, right? Because I think of like growing up in the little seesaws, right? It's like, okay, how do we, at what level do we sit so that we can create that, that beautiful balance? But either way, you have to be applying force to it. But when we create harmony, I think harmony is accepting where things are and understanding that in a harmonious way, they work for us and they work into our lives. So it's more about accepting and allowing it to flow versus creating, we talked a little bit earlier about our neural system and what happens to ourselves when we are too hard with ourselves, or what happens to ourselves when we recall money stories that don't feel good with us, right? Like you feel it somewhere in your body. So when you use the word harmony, I love that because it is the dance of the masculine and feminine energy. So let's talk. I want you to kind of talk a little bit more about that. What this dance looks like, and when do we apply each dance so that ultimately we can indeed create harmony across our entire lives, across our entire journey that that we get to walk in this life.
Beautiful topic, Anna. This yin and this yang, and if you look in nature and you look in your life and you look in everything in the principles of the universe, you'll see this this beautiful dance happening with the yin and yang energies, the masculine and feminine. And when we look at that harmony or that disharmony, that is, and we can either be in harmony, disharmony, or somewhere in between. But an overactive masculine energy might look like, if we're really stuck in the very much in the doing, very much in the overworking or the perfectionism or the holding on too tightly to control. I mean, I think a lot of us could probably relate that sense of holding on too tightly to money, because it's something that we've been in some ways taught to fear. And so I remember, when I look back at my relationship with money and how it's evolved over the years, I used to, the minute that I would get a trigger, maybe, like I said, maybe not enough money in my bank account, I would immediately go into that very strong masculine energy of holding on to control, right? And wanting to tighten the purse strings and kind of pull everything in and contract. And the opposite of that, when you look at the feminine side of it, is when we're actually sticking our head in the sand. We're almost too passive. We're not taking enough action, right? We're stuck in indecision, or we're waiting for something external to change, right? We're just not taking enough control. And so I would kind of, in my money story of old, I used to oscillate between either holding on too tight or not taking enough neutral action, kind of sticking my head in the sand and avoiding even looking at my finances, right? And then when I would avoid for too long and be too stuck in the feminine, I would then almost feel frightened. So I would swing straight over to the other side, right? We would go from one extreme to the other. And
Well,
what
you go
we
into a survival mode. You go into survival or doing mode.
That is survival mode. And survival mode can be, the energy of survival can be one extreme or the other. But what we want to do is to recognize when we're too far into one or too far into the other. So if we're too far into the doing and too far into the being, we want this to be a beautiful ebb and flow that kind of happens somewhere in the middle, right? There are times when we need to be doing more of the masculine with money, and there are times when we need to be doing more of the feminine. And I would say even in our daily lives, when we're intentional with money, we have to really work on that feeling of abundance, that state of being, that energy, that frequency that we're putting out into the world, that feeling of enoughness, because that feeling of enoughness allows us to attract more of the same. But at the same time, we also have to be taking action. We can't just do the enoughness and be stuck in that and be stuck in the more passive side of things, because if we don't take action, nothing's going to happen, right? But it's very much around finding that harmony and that balance between, and making sure that the energy behind the action that we take, or the energy behind our state of being, is neutral. It's all about where we come from, right? Does that make sense? It's all about the energy that sits behind that action taking, or that being state.
So here's a question for you. If I am listening to us today, right, and I'm male, right? So not just masculine energy, I'm a male. What does female energy look like, and how do we introduce it into our lives under the assumption that we are male, we're supposed to be masculine, we're supposed to be doers, protective. But at the end of the day, how do we connect to that softer energy?
That's such a beautiful question. It's really, really interesting, Anna, because it can be loaded for a number of reasons. This feminine energy, because a lot of men in particular, and it's not always, and this is not absolute, but are taught to be to almost move away from that feminine energy, right? We're taught to kind of, and part of it does come naturally, right? Men often are the protectors in the family. They certainly, for the most part, tend to be more physically strong. But as a male, if we reject that feminine side, and as a female, if we reject the masculine side, that's when the disharmony comes in. So for in this example, for a male who is who is very good at the action taking, the doing and making stuff happen, but really sometimes gets stuck into the scarcity or the overdoing and the perfectionism side of things, is to start to become to start to slow down. Just slowing down and becoming more present for what's going on in the body, becoming more present for the feelings in the body. And this doesn't mean we have to get this male to go into therapy and talk about his feelings and the experiences that happened in the past. It can be as simple as I sit quietly in meditation for 10 minutes a day and I ask my body, how does my body feel? And I don't get stuck in the thoughts, because the overthinking is a very strong masculine energy. I'm becoming more of a being. So I'm dropping into the body and saying, how do you feel, body? Where is the disharmony in my body? And noticing where I feel that. So that is more of a feminine energy. It doesn't mean that you are more female or that there is any kind of connotation to it. It can feel a little bit loaded, but it's actually not. It's just part of that beautiful dance. And if we don't have that harmony of the masculine, feminine, whether you're male or female, it doesn't matter. If we don't have that harmony where you've got this beautiful dance happening here in the middle space, you are going to find that you may end up with health issues, or it can start to impact your life in other ways.
And that's true for anything. And that's true. I'm sorry, Louise, but that's true for anything in our lives, right? If, I remember that, and we both come from corporate America, right? Or the corporate world. And the corporate world, there is no being, there's no feeling. It's all about doing, 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 right? And I personally know, and I believe that you do as well, what that has done to our bodies, right? How our bodies have reacted to it, and in turn, how that affected our relationships, right? So I think that having that beautiful dance, that beautiful synergy, that once we learn to be able to identify it, so I would say rather than calling it masculine and feminine, I'm going to call it the doing and the being, that when we realize that we are too far on one side or the other, that we can bring the other back into balance, so that not just our financial lives, our relationship with money, but also our own relationships with others and our own career and our own health also improve overall, right? So in today's world, it's called wellness, right? Mind, body, soul. But we like to call it here at Mita, we call it wealthness, right? Because it is ultimately affects the money or the transactional piece of things. And so how would you, if you notice, right? So I'm too far off to one side or too far off to the other side. How can we do it so that we come back to us, right? So this entire series is about coming back to us. How do we come back to us? How do we identify it? How do we come back to us so that we can indeed create a softer dance, right? Like a more flowy dance through it.
So Anna, the body will always tell us when there's a disharmony. If we pay attention to the feelings, and I think it was Neil Donald Walsh who said, the feelings are the language of the soul, right? The feelings are there for us to really notice when there is disharmony in the body or in the spirit or in the mind. Obviously, you can tell by the thoughts as well when we're overthinking and there's negative thoughts. But if we pay attention to the body, when we notice that we are overdriving, when we're taking too much action, when we are stuck in the doing rather than the being, is really to notice that first. Awareness is always the first step to change. And then to choose one thing that you can do to really rebalance that energy. So it might be, you might say, where can I slow down? Where can I start to focus more on abundance and focus more on being. And it might be sitting quietly in meditation. And meditation doesn't have to be where, I sit and focus on my breath. It might be that we sit in stillness for a little bit, we focus on our breathing, or we just start to pay attention to the world around us rather than being stuck in the mind and stuck in the doing, right?
Mhm.
So it's really just coming back to the body and coming, rather than only focusing on the mind and the action, focusing on slowing down, focusing on maybe we would write, maybe we would journal, right? Maybe we would reflect a little bit, or rest, or sit and express some gratitude. It just is. It's a softer and more gentle way of being rather than always doing.
I worked with a stress mastery coach for a while, and one of the things that he had me do was label my ultra ego, right? Label that voice in our head that's like, Anna, you got to keep going. You got to keep going. You can't slow down. You got to keep going. You can't look back. You got to go, 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 go. And he had me name that the ultra ego. I laugh about it because ego has such a negative connotation, but it could actually be a good connotation behind it. But he had me label her, and by the way, her name is Lucy. So if anybody wonders why her name is Lucy, it has nothing to do with my grandmother, because my grandmother's name was Lucy. It actually has a lot to do with the I Love Lucy show. And in particular, the portion where she is so mad and she's stomping on grapes, and she's just so mad stomping on those grapes over something that happened that she actually falls. And then she has no choice but to laugh about it, right? Because it's like, how stupid was that of me? And so the reason my alter ego is named Lucy is because he taught me to actually say to myself, when I find myself that I'm, in a very go, go, go mode, right, doing mode, just to stop and just to ask myself, hey, Lucy, what's up, right? What are you feeling? And it's at that moment that it's like, okay, why am I stuck in a doing mode? What is the feeling behind that? Right? And I thought that was so important and so impactful into me being able to slow down. So besides that, is there anything else that you can give to our listeners today, or viewers? Is there any other thoughts, ideas that they could actually go back into saying, what's the feeling, right? So the why, because I think that the why is so important that sometimes it's so often neglected as well, right? Why did we go into this overdrive mode? Or why did we decide, why did we stick our heads in the sand, right? There's a deeper meaning, there's a deeper feeling in there. So how?
And it comes back to what we were talking, in our last episode, around really being able to understand what our money story is. And when we start to notice that there's a story that we've told ourselves, which, by the way, most of the time is really not true at all, and we can see that there is that subconscious pattern. Once we've got awareness around the money story, and for those that haven't listened to episode 1, it's a fantastic way for you to really understand how we come to have a money story. But once you start to notice, to your point, Anna, where you get stuck in the doing, there's clearly a subconscious pattern that goes with that drive to do. Maybe there's a fear of not having enough, or a fear of not being good enough if I don't do, whatever it is. All of us are driven by different things. But it is to again, to notice and become aware of that story, and then to step out of it. And the way that we step out of it is that we pause and we slow down and we take a breath. And I'll share a quick story with you that when I was year before last, I was working with a coach, and I was working towards a big launch, and I was in doing mode. And like you, it's one of the things that I do pretty well. My masculine energy is very strongly developed.
Never, Louise. Never, never, never,
Never,
never, ever.
never. Neither of us, right? And I was just in doing mode, and I was just getting stuff done. Boom, 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 boom. And I said to my coach, oh my God, I'm just like, my body is in stress, and I'm overwhelmed. I've got so much going on. I don't even know what to start next, but I'm just doing. And she said, I want you to stop, and I want you to take the day off. And I said, what? What kind of advice is that? I can't stop. I've got a launch in 2 weeks. There's no way. She said, I want you to stop. I want you to stop, and I want you to take the whole day off. I want you to commit right now that you're going to shut your laptop. You're not going to answer any other questions. You're going to say no. You're going to put a note on saying that you've taken the day out. Do you know, Anna, it was the hardest thing that I ever had to do, but it was the most profound. And the
Yes.
reason it was the most profound was when I forced myself suddenly into a state of being, and I don't want to use the word force, I chose to suddenly opt for a state of being. I created this space, and suddenly, after 2 or 3 hours of having space, I went for a walk in nature. I took off my shoes. I listened to the sound of the birds. I sat in meditation for 45 minutes. I went and hung out with my kids and just chit chatted and gave them a hug. Suddenly, I got this clarity, and it was like, oh, wow, that's what I need to do next. That's what I need to prioritize. And then I got all these ideas just flooded in of the next thing that I'm going to do. In fact, I need to focus on that. I need to shift this about. It literally changed the entire trajectory of my launch, and my launch went on to be super profitable. But do you know that if I hadn't taken that time and stopped, I would have continued to force and push and shove my way forward and white knuckle my way into that launch. It would never have been as successful as it was, because I didn't have all that clarity and I didn't have all those thoughts. So
Yeah.
what I'm trying to really highlight here is that sense of being able to, sometimes it's the opposite of what we think it is. We're taught that if we want something, all we got to do is go and get it. Yes, that's true. But at the same time, there are times when we need to pause and stop and
Mhm.
slow, connect with nature, come back to the beingness. And sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes when we're somebody who's depressed or stuck or can't really feel like they can take action, and they're stuck too much in the beingness, they're too stuck in the impotence of being able to do anything, the indecision. Sometimes all we have to do is just commit to one thing and take a little bit of action, and that energy starts to move again. And then we're like, okay, now that I'm back to a more neutral place, what is it that I need to do that moves me towards my vision? So do you see what I mean by there's such a beautiful balance that has to happen between the doing and the being? And the health, the most wealthy we can be, whether it's in, and this applies to health, to love, to relationships, as it does to wealth, is there
Mhm.
has to be this harmony of the doing and the being. There has to be the balance.
Yeah, I think that's so beautiful. And, one of the things that I did pick up from what you said is that here you coach, I coach clients, right? And we both have coaches. So I find that really funny because I'm like, yeah, we need coaches too. So that we can get out of our heads, we can get out of our beings, right? Because sometimes we get into this go 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 mode and we forget about the, let's take a pause. Let's do it. I was telling you a little bit earlier today that on Monday, because obviously this is the startup to our podcast, and we've been on this very go 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 mode, the whole team and myself, and came Monday where I had not stopped at all through the weekend, in just getting everything set up. And comes Monday, I remember, getting my routine going at 7 a.m., get it started at 7:30. By 3:30, I hit a wall. I mean, and this wall was so hard, I could barely make it to the couch to lay down. And it was very interesting because then I did have a person that came and gave me, and we were scheduled for a regular IV, as I'm working through my own health issues of autoimmune from being this push 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 drive, right? And so she came over, and then the very next day I told my trainer, I told him what happened. So I said to him, I said, can we please be gentler with the body today, because I'm recovering from that. And you know what he said to me at the end? He goes, Anna, make sure you meditate today and tomorrow morning. And I just looked at him and he goes, and you know what he said to me? He goes, I know you have not been doing it. I said, how do you know? He goes, I know. And he's 100% accurate. I have not done my meditation for like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and I am like, go, 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 go. You can do this, right? So, so I thought it was, I kind of, I realize now that we're at 29 minutes, right, since we started. So I want us to share because, share with our listeners and our viewers, if you had to biohack your way, right? What little biohacking can you do when, in order to come into this beautiful dance, right? That is the male energy, the masculine energy, the doing energy into the female energy, right? Into the feminine, into the being, right? Because I feel that it's so important as we work through our own well-being in our journey. I work with clients and money and everything that goes with it. I always tell my clients, that's like, here's the little black couch. Let's sit down and talk, right? But I notice that I myself have to do this dance with them, right? I have to take them through the dance. So for those listening to us today, Louise, and I thank you again so much for sharing with us your wisdom, your knowledge, your experience. What can someone do today to biohack it? And then I want you to please end it with that beautiful meditation you did for me the other day as we were concluding our conversation. And I would like to share that with our listeners and our viewers today. So I'll leave the rest to you, and I promise I'll do the meditation with you.
Amazing. So Anna, you were talking just now about how you were pushed on through the weekend because you had so much going on, and then eventually you kind of just collapsed into exhaustion. And it's so interesting how, and this is such a beautiful example of how if we don't respect that harmony and that dance and that balance of masculine and feminine, one of the things that can happen to us is that the body will eventually force us into the being state. So if we are doing so much that we don't listen and take those pauses and slow it down and become more aware, the body, and I've experienced this myself too, and I'm sure there's many people who can relate, but the body eventually forces us into that state. It eventually says, I can't do this anymore. I need you to replenish. It's part of the laws of nature, right? I need to shift you into the being state of slowing down, of being so tired that you almost can't get up, right? Um, so one of the beautiful ways to bring yourself back to a more being state, I do one of two things. One of the things I do is I do multiple checkpoints throughout the day, and if I'm in a really busy period, I actually set alarms to pause and to come back to the being state. And that's such a beautiful biohack because it it, it, we're using both the masculine and the feminine to move into the being state. We're setting an alarm, which is a very masculine thing to do, but we're then signaling, okay, I'm coming back into the being state. But I'm going to take you through now a short meditation, a very, very short one, because I can do a long one, which I do for 2 minutes each morning before I start my day. When I first wake up, and the reason that I do it first thing in the morning, before I mean, I'm awake, but before I get out of bed, is because I don't know if you know this, but when you first wake up in the morning, your brain is in, it's in it comes out of the theta brainwave state, which is the very, very sort of, that's our sleeping state. It's when we're most receptive to suggestion, into the alpha brainwave state, which is slightly more awake, but still very suggestive and susceptible to suggestion. It's when we're most creative. And before we get into that beta brainwave state, which is when we're thinking and doing, that's the more masculine energy. So the more feminine energy is this theta and alpha brainwave state. And when we can tap into that brainwave state first thing in the morning, we can really utilize that being state to tap into abundance, to gratitude, to all the things that can really make a positive impact in terms of our frequency and our receiving of money into our lives, and our receiving of wealth, and our ultimate optimal health. So I'm going to get everybody to find a place to just sit. And obviously, if you're driving, please, there's a little caveat to that. Please don't close your eyes. You can listen for sure, but just be cautious, obviously, if you are driving, listening to this. So just close your eyes, and I just want you to take a moment and place both of your hands over your heart, like I'm doing here, over your heart space. It's not over your physical heart. It's really in the center of your chest. And I just want you to bring your attention to your breath. And let's start by taking a couple of deep breaths in. And as you breathe in and out, as you slow your breathing down, I want you to breathe in and out through your heart space, so through your hands. Breathe in and out. And you can imagine, if you want to, that you've got a nose or a mouth down there if it's easier, but just breathe in and out through your heart space. Imagine that the air is being drawn in and being let out through the center of your chest. And we call this heart coherence breathing. And what it actually does is that it brings your heart and your brain waves into coherence. Heart coherence breathing calms your central nervous system. It reduces stress. And it allows us to tap into gratitude and into abundance. And I just want you to take a couple more breaths, breathing in and out through your heart space. And as you do so, I want you to expand your energy from the center of your chest out. So as you breathe in, bring the energy in through the center of your chest. And as you breathe out, expand that energy out a little bit further than your energy field. So you breathe in, you bring the energy in. And as you breathe out, expand that energy a little bit further each time, like a balloon. And what you'll notice is that your body starts to relax. You start to feel calmer. And then I want you to ask yourself, how would I move through today if I already felt abundant? Not just in money, but in time and in energy and in love and in opportunity. And as you continue to breathe in and out through your heart space, I really want you to feel that abundance. I want you to feel that frequency in your body. I want you to feel what it feels like energetically in your body and in your energy field to feel the frequency of abundance. Maybe it feels open. Maybe it feels calm. Maybe it feels confident or expansive. And I want you to feel that frequency throughout your head, throughout your chest, down your arms and into your whole being. And just continue to breathe in and out through your heart space. And now you're going to anchor it with the phrase, I am abundant, I am safe, and I am free. And you can say to yourself in your mind, I am abundant, I am safe, and I am free. And you're going to carry this feeling, this frequency of abundance, you're going to carry it through into your day. You're going to take it through your coffee, your breakfast, your emails, your conversations, your interactions. The actions that you're going to take are going to be laced and doused with abundance. Because when your nervous system feels safe and abundant, you are going to naturally start making choices that align with that frequency. And so it's not always about doing more. It's about being from that energy first. And that's the foundation of wealth being. It starts with how you feel in your body before anything shows up in your bank account. And so now that you know what this energy feels like, you can tap into this energy at any time, at any point during your day. You can close your eyes, breathe through your heart space, and take 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or even 30 seconds to shift your state back into abundance. And this is the true beingness.
Louise, those were beautiful words, and thank you for this beautiful meditation. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for doing what you do and for sharing a little bit of love, compassion into this world, and also for sharing your experience. And, it's how we make the world just a little bit better, how we pay it forward. So thank you. Have a beautiful day.